Well, good afternoon and welcome to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. This is our weekly call-in town hall and radio show. That's right. You can actually call in today to your state representative at 804-454-1366. That's 804-454-1366. And you can ask your question right here, right now. I'm State Senator Amanda Chase, your weekly radio show host, and just completing week number 6 of the General Assembly, and it's been quite the week. I serve you at the state level, so don't confuse me with the federal level that meets in D.C. like Senator Kaine. No, that's the federal level. I'm a state senator, and I want to make that very clear. Very big difference. And my office is at the state capitol in downtown Richmond. I represent the 11th Senatorial District, which includes all of Amelia, all of Colonial Heights, and most of Chesterfield. And I'm also co-founder of the Transparency Caucus, which worked in a bipartisan, bicameral way to ensure that committee meetings are streamed right along with the regular sessions that you're used to being able to see. And we also ensured that you could get recorded votes in the House, in the committee meetings. We wanted to make sure that you could have greater access to your legislature and be able to view our work firsthand. For the first time in Virginia's legislative history, this legislative services will be providing this service, and you can go to virginiageneralassembly.gov. Now, I understand that we had a caller from the Lee Brothers show regarding gun control, and let's just see if David, if he's still there.
Hello, Senator Chase.
How are you, David?
I'm fine.
Where are you calling from today?
Richmond, Virginia.
Okay, fantastic. What's on your mind?
I was listening to the Lee Brothers, and I think what we have, as Americans, have allowed the anti-gun and the anti-gun politicians and coalitions to do is confuse us about the Second Amendment.
Right,
and
which is our constitutional right.
It is. And if you listen to Justice Scalia says one of the main problems we have with people trying to interpret the rights that we have in this country is they try to interpret what the words mean today, not what they meant when they were written.
That's exactly right.
And when you look at the Second Amendment, I think you can break it down into two parts. That well-regulated militia, we were at war most of our country's history in the beginning. Well, when there's peacetime, then the second part says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. When we were not in war and we were in peacetime, people didn't take their guns and turn them back in.
That's right.
We have way overcomplicated this thing.
That's
right. And we're
right.
allowing them to push this agenda, and it just is sickening.
Well, and I aim to keep that from happening, and I will tell you, you're right. You know, the reason we have the Second Amendment, it's in our Constitution. It's one of our fundamental rights, and I like my First Amendment rights as much as I do my Second Amendment rights, and I don't want either one of those to be restricted. And I think sometimes we live in a snowflake world. I think we're raising snowflakes out in suburban America, and we really need to examine what we're doing. If we allow the government to take away our guns, how are we going to defend ourselves? I had a good friend of mine who reached out to me on Facebook, and I'm a mom. I've got 4 kids, and I have 2 in our public school systems, and I'm just as concerned about the gun violence as anyone else. But here's what I would tell you. The answer is not with gun control. The answer is a number of things, but it's not the gun control. It's the person that's doing the killing. I look at my very good friend, Lieutenant Pilot Trooper Jay Cullen, who was killed. He's one of my neighbors, and his wife Karen is a friend, and he lost his life in the Charlottesville incident, and it wasn't a gun that killed him, and nor was it involved in any of the riots that took place in Charlottesville. It was a car that actually took someone's life. We can use any type of, you could use a knife, you can use other things other than just guns, but it's become so politicized. And I know when I was growing up and my parents were growing up, most families had a shotgun in their house. That was your security system back then. And, now, I'm going back to, we're raising snowflake children who are not used to seeing guns and having guns and being familiar with the safety and the proper respect of how to use these weapons. But, you look at countries like Israel where they are raised. Everybody serves in the military. Everybody knows how to operate
Yes,
and
ma'am.
use guns, and we have gotten so far away from that. And it's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate. So
It is very unfortunate, and I'm a professional firearms trainer, and when I try to educate my clients, I try to explain to them, if you look at the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment never wavered from what it is. It morphed a little bit from the original writings to what it ended up. But the original right to bear arms was not our Second Amendment. It was actually our 10th Amendment. And if our founding fathers thought it was so important to make our first right, the right of free speech and religion and everything that's contained in that, then what I would like to know is, from all these anti-gun people, they tell us all the time, well, they didn't think it was so important. They would not want you to have what you have today. Then why did they argue about it for 15 years, and then the second most important right they could give the American citizens was the right to bear arms?
that's right. And I will tell you a true story. I had a good friend of mine who is a firearms instructor, and they took me out to a range, and I got to shoot the pistol. I got to shoot an AR-15 with a scope. I got to shoot a number of things, and a lot of people are saying, outlaw the AR-15s. I could actually get a better aim. I mean, people do this to practice. It's a game or a sport, just like throwing darts at a dartboard. I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
so this idea, and then you think about terrorism. We can't control. I mean, we try to control terrorism. We do our very best with public safety, and I'm so thankful for the Virginia State Police and all they do, and federally, and so on and so forth. But I'm telling you, the best line of defense is yourself. And in my neighborhood, we've lately been having a number of break-ins, and I can tell you, our police resources are strapped. And so my family is protected, and I hope and encourage everyone to do the same. Dave, thanks so much for calling in today, and I hope you'll continue to listen, because we've got a lot of exciting things to talk about today. Thanks for calling in.
Call.
Absolutely. So thanks for calling in, Dave, and anybody else that wants to call in today. I'm happy to take your questions. There are a couple of highlights that I want to talk to you about that happened this week. First of all, last week when we were talking about the budget and expanding Medicaid. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. The director of the OMB, what does the OMB stand for? Office of Management and Budget. Mick Mulvaney's statement today, I think, is very telling and very important, and I'm going to break it down for you. This is what he says. He says, this administration is committed to addressing the unsustainable growth of Obamacare's Medicaid expansion. The program has resulted in an explosion of state and federal spending. And abundant evidence suggests that new enrollees, get this, are not experiencing health improvements to justify this dramatic increase in cost. State expansion also created a bias in favor of able-bodied adults at the expense of those who truly need Medicaid services. For these reasons, the president's budget repeals Obamacare's Medicaid expansion and supports increased flexibility for states to design solutions that best meet the needs of their lower income and most vulnerable populations. I've been talking about this, and to hear that from Mick Mulvaney is just confirmation again that expanding Medicaid is not a good idea for Virginia. And to see what the House has done to say that they have a conservative approach to expanding Medicaid, friends, there's no such thing. There is no such thing. Medicaid was not intended for able-bodied people. And I know under current Medicaid, there are able-bodied people who are on it, but that's not what it was intended for. It was supposed to be a safety net for the vulnerable, the people who have the intellectual disabilities, the developmental disabilities. And we have 3,000 people waiting on a list right now that need our services. And we, as the Commonwealth, have already committed and promised to help these people. But do you know what happened in the House budget? even though they increased the hospital tax, even though they took the federal dollars 9-1 for every, meaning for every $9 we get from the federal government, the state contributes $1. They're only covering about 600 of the 3,000. I think that's very telling. That's very telling. You know, the state budget's chasm is $600 million, and that's the way we left it on Friday. And you're going to want to stay tuned because I'm going to talk to you about the $600 million deficit and what that means for you and your family. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Cut to the Chase. Welcome back to Cut to the Chase with State Senator Amanda Chase, and I welcome your calls at 804-454-1366. That's 804-454-1366. So what does this mean for your family? What happens if we get this wrong? Let me tell you what's going to happen. Because Virginia must balance its budget, if we expand Medicaid, you're going to see cuts. You're going to see cuts to service, cuts to education. You're going to see cuts to transportation. I have bridges in my district that we can't even drive fire trucks over for EMS. Totally can't. It's just going to continue to, Medicaid is going to continue to increase as the cost increase. So it used to be that Medicaid was only 2% of our budget, and now it's all the way up to 22% and climbing exponentially. So do you want your taxes to go up? I know that I don't want my taxes to go up. I'd like to stay in Virginia where I grew up. And I don't want my budget, I don't want my family budget to explode because my taxes are going up and then I can't afford as many things for my family, just the basics, right? So let's talk about the state budget chasm right now. It's $600 million as we speak. This week at Virginia's Capitol, the House and the Senate began negotiations to reconcile the differences between the respective versions of the Commonwealth's. This is the 2018-2020 biennial budget. So when we have a budget, it's for 2 years. And last week, I noted that the two budgets take very different approaches to spending, meaning your tax dollars. And this week, we learned how great those differences are. Well, the Senate Finance Committee has determined that the differences in the two budgets exceeds $800 million. And that's a very large difference to rectify. Now, making matters more challenging, the House plan spends its extra money throughout the budget, but not on health care. This is unbelievable, which is where one would assume it would go if you support the premise for which it has been expanded. But it's not. It's not. While most of the media attention has been on the House's decision to adopt Obamacare's optional Medicaid expansion plan, the House's budget has allocated its additional spending, get this, throughout the budget, not just on health care. You would think they would go back and honor those priority one waivers that I was talking about, the 3,000 that I continue to talk about that have intellectual and developmental disabilities, but they did not cover them, which is just unbelievable. Did you know that effectively the House's plan represents the largest single-year growth of Virginia's growth in government in 14 years? The largest growth of Virginia government in 14 years. I want that to sink in for a minute. When I ran for office, I ran on limiting government. Because what happens when you have a bloated government that only continues to get bigger? It continues to eat your money. Your tax, we talk about taxpayer dollars, that's your paycheck, okay? So let's talk about the state Senate's budget, which I supported. This does not have Medicaid in it, first of all. In fact, we took the Medicaid out. So despite this, it is the Senate's budget plan that actually places more funds into something called a cash reserve fund. I want to make sure that Virginia continues to have a AAA bond rating. And in order to do that, we have to have a certain amount of money in that cash reserve fund. Under the Senate's budget, without all that extra spending and taxes, we've actually put more money in that cash reserve fund so that we can protect our AAA bond rating. And the Senate budget is a conservative budget. It entirely consistent with Virginia's long-standing record of producing balanced budgets with the funds that we have. And I want to emphasize that, the funds that we have. First, we had to take the Medicaid out of the House budget. Now, the House will assert that the Senate is cutting services. We are actually restoring the state budget to where we should have started had Medicaid not been included in our budget. And we call it a conservative or skinny budget. Under the Senate's budget, our public schools will actually be receiving more money over the next 2 years than they did over the last 2 years. So, they're just trying to scare you, I think, and say, we're cutting cutting our funding to our public schools. That is not true. And the same applies to public safety and law enforcement and healthcare and higher education. So why then are some claiming that the Senate budget cuts spending? It's because the Senate budget, again, is not being compared to the current budget, but to the budget proposed by former Governor Terry McAuliffe as he was leaving office. And the McAuliffe budget was built upon the inflated revenues that accompany Obamacare Medicaid expansion. Doing this gave McAuliffe the opportunity to highlight dramatic increases in government spending, just as he was planning to spend a lot more time with Democrat activists in Iowa and New Hampshire. And so he left that present for us. Thank you very much. No thanks. McAuliffe was not the first Virginia governor to produce an inflated budget as he was preparing to leave office. And I know that Scott Lee was talking about Governor Kane. Well, in 2010, then Governor Kane proposed a budget that included a $2 billion annual tax increase just before he was leaving office. So this isn't the first time that a Democrat has done this to us. And now we're facing we are facing a fiscal cliff caused by the end of the Obama stimulus package. Kane based his entire budget on a massive income tax increase to avoid making the actual spending cuts that were required to bring the budget into balance. So let me equate this to your family situation. This would be the same as instead of using your checkbook, let's just charge it on that charge card. Well, guess what happens? You're eventually going to get a bill in the mail, and you're going to have to pay that. So if you remember correctly, then Governor Kane left those tough decisions to his successor, Governor McDonnell. And when Kane's tax increase was put to a vote in the House of Delegates, it was defeated by a vote of, do you think it's close? Nope, it was 97-0, with the bill's sponsor abstaining. I mean, he was even embarrassed and didn't even vote for it. It was that bad. So basing a budget on Obamacare's Medicaid expansion may prove to be just as fiscally reckless as Kane's $2 billion tax hike plan. Well, 6 days before the House introduced its plan, the president's administration introduced a federal budget that phases out funding for Medicaid expansion. And in fact, early this week, you probably heard about this, there are 20 states announced a new lawsuit challenging Obamacare in court, subjecting the law to a new legal challenge. And we've already talked about Mick Mulvaney's comment, who is the director of OMB, and when he weighed in on Virginia's debate over expansion late this week, reinstating the administration's commitment to addressing the unsustainable growth of Obamacare's Medicaid expansion. And I want you to say this word over and over again. It's unsustainable. It is unsustainable. It would be like me taking my kids to Walmart. We're Walmart Republicans, y'all. And letting my kids buy whatever they want. Now, that makes me happy as a mom to get my kids whatever they want. But eventually the bill comes home and somebody has to pay for that. So that is unsustainable. And you cannot continue to charge and charge and charge and charge and not have a bill come home. As a legislator, I believe it is part of my duty to make decisions that not only benefit Virginia and its people today, but also our kids, right? We don't want to pass this on to our kids. I mean, look at what the federal government's doing to us and to our kids. Considering all we know now, adopting Obamacare's Medicaid expansion now would betray that responsibility. So I'm sticking with the Senate budget plan, which is conservative, sustainable, and fiscally responsible. And I want to I think we had 17 members of the House of Delegates whenever our budget went over to the House. They actually accepted our budget. 17 of them voted to accept our budget as amendment. I won't get all technical on you, but basically they said they liked our budget and they didn't like theirs. So they don't typically do that kind of thing. But when we come back, we're going to continue talking. I'm also going to talk to you about some bills that I've patroned that are coming back that I passed. So anyway, stay tuned. We'll be right back with Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. So welcome back to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase, and I have Ben Knotts from Americans for Prosperity on the line. And before we go to talk about my bills, I really want Ben to talk to us a little bit about, first of all, I want to thank AFP for their hard work on lobbying my Senate and House colleagues to make sure that they stay in line with what they ran on when they ran for office, which is that they're going to fight and not give in to this terrible Medicaid expansion. And Ben, one of the things we've already talked about was the Mulvaney's comments yesterday. And, Delegate Kilgore had come out last week with this idea, this notion that we could go with a Kentucky-style Medicaid expansion because it was conservative and had a work requirement on it. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on tonight, Amanda. And this is a pivotal moment, and this is a momentous moment because the momentum is shifting now with the White House opposing expansion in Virginia. And Mulvaney's tweet is very clear about what the intention of the administration is. They are trying to rein in the out-of-control spending on Obamacare's Medicaid expansions. In Kentucky, they gave work requirements and waivers to rein in Medicaid expansion. In Indiana, they passed work requirements and waivers to rein in Medicaid expansion. What they're trying to do in Virginia is grow Medicaid and expand it more with waivers, which is something the Trump administration has never done. So Mulvaney is directly saying in his tweet, he says, we are committed to reining in the uncontrollable costs of Medicaid expansion because it does not achieve the outcome we desire. So you cannot get any clearer than that this is in direct opposition to the direction the Trump administration is going.
Well, it's interesting. We had some of our staff to go in and give us a breakdown comparing Kentucky versus Virginia work requirements and the Indiana versus Virginia work requirements. And the thing that sticks out to me the most, Kentucky requires monthly reporting of participation in at least one of the qualifying activities. Virginia would have no reporting requirements. Kentucky offers a 1-month grace period for those failing to comply with work requirements, after which recipients have their benefits suspended. Virginia would have no penalty for failing to follow a work requirement. And I can go through each of these, like Kentucky requires a 6-month suspension for anyone not reporting a change in circumstance. Basically, Virginia does not have a Kentucky or an Indiana plan because there's no reporting requirements. There's no penalty for failing to follow a work requirement. There's no penalty or verification. This is not good for Virginia, and I think it's very, I love my friends in the House, but I think they have taken a wrong turn. How's that?
And Amanda, I agree with you. And just you look at what you just said. If you look at the facts, you don't look at the politics. If you just look at the facts, you can see that what they were doing in Kentucky and Indiana was trying to control an out-of-control Medicaid expansion. Even with the work requirements, they originally thought it was only going to be 133,000 people on the system added in for Medicaid expansion. Even with work requirements in 2020, they're still expecting close to 500,000 more people on it than they ever anticipated. Virginia needs to understand that the conservative thing to do is to fight for a free market healthcare system where the costs are brought down. You cannot appease people by giving into these massive programs that are failing the people they're supposed to help. And that's what breaks my heart. That really does hurt to see people buying into an idea that this will solve the problem when the system's messed up already, isn't it, Amanda?
Well, yeah, and I have good news for people because everybody's like, why is it Republicans always just say no? Well, guess what? We are able to say yes on some private health care and health coverage options. And in fact, I'm going to talk to you about them. Senate Bill 844. And before I go into these, there's about 5 or 6 of these. And the Richmond Times-Dispatch called the Senate's health care package, and it's all private, good ideas for health care. And how many times do you get that from the Richmond Times-Dispatch on a Republican initiative by Senate Republicans? So Senate Bill 844, that's the short-term coverage plans to be offered for 364 days instead of the current 90 days. And that's going to be for people who are in between jobs. And it would place requirements on health insurance companies to offer these plans in more areas of the Commonwealth and allow less expensive short-term coverage plans. What about Senate Bill 935, which is a group insurance plan that allows more Virginians to participate in insurance pools? I mean, I'm just thinking about what accountants, I wonder if pastors could have their own group or insurance plan. So that's a second option. A third option is something, it's Senate Bill 964, and it would allow catastrophic health coverage plans which provide essential health benefits to be offered to more Virginians. These are those plans they're less expensive than plans offered under the terms of the Affordable Care Act, and they're available currently to those under age of 30, but this bill would remove the age limit and make those plans more widely available. And then the one that I always talk about, Senate Bill 915, because it deals with the Priority 1 waivers. And you and I, Ben, have been talking about how we as Virginians should honor our current obligation to help those who cannot help themselves. I mean, Medicaid was not designed for people who can work. Like, that just flies in the face of what this program was designed for. So,
and I'll tell you, Amanda, on that point with what you just went over, all these different ways that actually help people have better quality care and more affordable care. And this is what the whole purpose of it is to have more affordable and better quality care. And you're addressing that with these Senate bills.
Thank you, Ben. Welcome back to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase, and I have Ben Knotts from Americans for Prosperity on the line. And Ben, people are listening, and they just want to do something. I know you all are doing that. You're saying, what can I possibly do? I think they should call their state senators and tell them to hold the line. We have budget conferees now. There's 7 in the Senate and 7 in the House. And, they need to hear from you. And I'm going to put a list of those on my website, and I'm going to try to remember all of them offline, and maybe you can help me with this. But I know that Senator Hanger is one of the ones that's on the Budget Committee. Senator Normant is on that list. Senator Newman is on that list. This off from the top of my head here, Senator Howell, and, let me think. Who am I missing in the Senate? That's 1, 2, 3.
Well, I'll tell you the most important one I really want to emphasize based on the radio market right here. And Chris Peace, Delegate Chris Peace in the House is on the committee. And he wrote a very, very, I'd say it was a very pious article emphasizing his faith and saying that that's the number one reason we should expand Medicaid. And I'll tell you, for the market that's listening in, I know there's a lot of good conservative Christians that are listening in. And listen, there are people on Medicaid that are suffering right now because they haven't got quality care. They have been waiting months to get care, much like the people that Amanda was talking about. Some of the people that are on the system already are waiting up to 9 months without getting any care. And so it's, the moral thing. We have a moral and a financial responsibility to pay for the people we have, and we're not doing a good job doing it. So Delegate Chris Peace wrote a really honest article, but I would encourage everyone listening in to give him a call and let him know you disagree with that. Because if that's really your presupposition, we're failing people morally by not giving them the care that we promised them. And I know that's how you feel about it, Amanda.
That's exactly right. And I found my list. It's Normant, Hanger. I have to give y'all action items. Senator Normant, Hanger, Newman, Ruff, Wagner, Saslaw, and Howe. I know you're saying, slow down. But I also want to give you the 7 in the House. It's Speaker Cox, Delegate Jones, Delegate Peace, Delegate Knight, Delegate Garrett, Delegate Torian, and Delegate Sickles. Y'all need to call them. Call them every day. Every other 5 minutes, no. They need to hear from you and tell them that you don't want them to expand Medicaid. And I tell you, the Senate is not going to buckle. I don't care what you are hearing. The Senate has a pact with each other, okay? When the Senate makes a pact, Senate Republicans make a pact, we make a pact. We're not going to break that promise. So we're going to continue to be the backstop for this. And Ben, you keep doing what you're doing, lobbying and getting these folks to stay true to what they ran on. And I appreciate
and Amanda, it really fast. The Washington Post just put out a story while we were on here, and the governor is saying that he's pretty much giving signs that he don't think the Senate is going to fold in Medicaid expansion, and he's going to be forced to have to put a Medicaid expansion amendment in. So it looks like the House is falling. So let's continue to fight against Medicaid expansion and Obamacare, because it looks like the momentum's with us now.
Well, you're exactly right, and I hope Speaker Cox is looking for a way out. I think Mulvaney's comments hopefully inspires him to get off this fast-moving train and wake up. I mean, we all make mistakes. I mean, it's easy to do, but
he is a good man. And
he
is.
Can be
Love a good leader right here. I'm so excited. I hope he does it, Amanda. I hope he does.
I'm believing.
100%.
That's right. Y'all pray hard. Pray hard. Give Speaker Cox
Amanda.
a call.
Be good.
All right. Thanks so much. Ben Knotts with Americans for Prosperity. So appreciate all his work. I feel like I'm sitting in committee meetings all day long, and I want to go lobby, and I have my fellow members in the House to say, come on, stand strong, don't give in. I want to go real quickly to something else that you may have seen on the floor this week was, there's so many things I want to talk about today, and I'm running out of time here. The rate freeze. You remember hearing about that? I actually signed on as a co-patron to Senator Peterson, his bill. And I feel like, especially with this issue, he has been an honest broker on this issue about returning the power back to the State Corporation Commission. So basically what happened, there were a number of us who put in bills that would return to the ratepayer the refunds. And anyway, our bill got killed. Died a painful death. And there was one bill left, which we call the Dominion bill. That's just what we call it. I'm not going to be politically correct. But another piece of legislation that has been a focus this session, which came to a culmination this week, are the Dominion rate freeze bills. And while some of us work to enforce a rate review restoration and customer refunds, another view allowed for potential refunds and expanding the grid with renewables and investment in grid infrastructure. Okay, so there was a lot of discussion in both chambers, which resulted in amendments and substitutes. And if you don't know what that means, it basically means whenever we change the legislation as it goes through the process, you'll end up with amendments, just like a line change or a substitute, when basically you got your whole bill and you get something else and put that in there. But ultimately, the final product of Senate Bill 966 and House Bill 1558 allowed Dominion the potential of keeping over earnings and reinvesting them in the grid. No, I think it's important that we reinvest in our grid. I think that's important. We need to modernize our grid so that we don't have continued power outages like we did today with these high winds, and in Northern Virginia knocked out a whole bunch of people who don't have power today. And, that's not good. And so I think, there's some of these things that we should do. They talked about undergrounding some of the cables and wires and that type of thing. rather than returning these refunds to customers. Now, initially, I'm like, if it's only a couple bucks a month, I wouldn't mind reinvesting this money into my grid revitalization and, upgrading. They're talking about these smart boxes that you would have on the side of your house, which I know some of you are conspiracy theorists and, your mind is going crazy, but it can help them to detect whether the power goes out in your neighborhood and kind of respond more quickly to those power outages. So I think that is a good thing. The bill was modified a lot. Like, one of the things that I was concerned about was double dipping on expenses. And what do I mean by that? Basically, they were allowed to recoup their expense in the base rate, and then and in addition to not returning the refund to you. So it's kind of like a double dip, but that was fixed in the amended bill. But, there still, although it was better, there were some things that I had issues with. It just didn't follow tight enough state corporation commission standards. I have a friend in the Attorney General's office who's an attorney that understands this better than I do, and got them to do a breakdown of exactly what this did. And I'm still not completely satisfied. So I voted against this bill with the hopes that we can work out legislation going forward that will be more transparent and accountable to the ratepayers. I think it's a better bill, but it's still got a little ways to go. We don't know how much all these renewables are going to cost. And I think that if we run the risk of the ratepayer not getting a refund, and I'm just concerned about that. So I just voted no. So there you have it. So let me talk about some of my other bills because I know we're running out of time already. I actually have 7 bills that I've patroned that have actually passed both the House and the Senate and are waiting for the governor to sign them. I'm very happy about that. I've been working very hard for you all. Let me tell you about Senate Bill 20, which is the Red Tape Reduction Commission, and I joke around with Scott Lee and I tell him this is the Lee Brothers bill. So this pilot program creates a 3-year regulatory reduction pilot program that will be administered by the Department of Planning and Budget, and it focuses on two departments: the Department of Professional and Occupational Licensing and the Department of Criminal Justice Services, which produce about 40% of all regulatory requirements. And the goal is to reduce regulatory requirements, compliance costs, and regulatory burden across agencies by 25% by July 1 of 2021. And I think it's good anytime that we reduce regulations, just to put this in line with how does this affect you. Anytime you're dealing with a state agency and they're more effective and more efficient, it's going to save you time and money in the long run. So the governor has told me he's going to sign that bill, so that will be one. Senate Bill 715. This is another bill that's actually gone by for the day twice on the floor of the House. It's passed the Senate, it's passed all the subcommittees in the House, and is actually on the floor. And this bill allows EMS and firefighters to utilize their concealed carry permits, their permit rights with the permission of their chief or their county, if applicable, with similar training to that of a fire marshal. So you want to stay tuned. I've got a number of bills that I want you to know that I work really hard for you and patron these bills, and I've actually gotten some success this year. Probably the best I've done since I've been in office. I guess every year is a learning curve, and you get better every year. But I'm very pleased to report a couple bills. So stay tuned, and I'll let you know what those are when we come back right after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Cut to the Chase with State Senator Amanda Chase, and late breaking news here at 6:23 p.m. Laura Vizella with the Washington Post reports, and I want to thank Ben for sending this to me. Ben Knotts. Northam threatens nicely. And those of you who know Northam is that's his style, I guess. But to use an amendment to muscle in Medicaid, and as I know, the governor can actually send down amendments. And we have, we're we're going to have a real fight on our hands next week, and I can already see this. A nice fight, of course. But it says Governor Ralph Northam on Friday gently warned state budget negotiators to send him a spending plan that includes Medicaid expansion, or he will add expansion as an amendment, a procedure that gives him a stronger hand in the Senate. If forced to go that route, Northam said he would have more power to shape an expansion deal already passed by House Republicans that calls for work requirements, co-pays, and other conservative measures. Well, we know what that's not really conservative, but we're obviously compromised, and if I send an amendment down, which I will if I need to, some of those compromises won't be in there. Northam later told reporters, noting that he would have more to say over how to spend the $420 million in projected savings from expansion. Northam won office last year on a promise to expand the federal state health care program to as many as 400,000 uninsured Virginians. Republicans in the House and Senate steadfastly blocked expansion for the 4 years under Northam's predecessor, Terry McAuliffe. So there you have it. That's what he's going to try to do. So, we're going to see next week's going to be exciting. You definitely want to tune in next week because I will have so much to report to you. Anyway, let me just go back to my bills real quick before we run out of time here. So I had a bill that passed the House and the Senate that would allow our fire and EMS to carry. It has a lot of safety restrictions on that. Basically, you'd be the equivalent of a fire marshal and go through that training. Senate Bill 912 allows retired law enforcement officers who return to work to retain their credentials to carry. So when a retired law enforcement officer retires, he gets to keep his badge and he can continue to conceal carry. However, if he returned back to work in an administrative capacity, they would have to give it up, and that was never the intention. So I put that bill in. I want to thank Kevin Carroll, president of the Fraternal Order of Police, for asking me to carry that legislation, and it's waiting for the governor's signature. Senate Bill 717 is a pro-business bill. Those of you who have a health insurance license will appreciate this. It's a transparency bill that allows small business owners to know what they're going to get paid before they do the work and then don't get paid. What a novel concept. So currently, agent commissions are included among internal administrative and marketing cost and profit and are included in the medical loss ratio. What this bill does is it basically requires health plans to specifically report their anticipated agent commission structure along with their annual rate filing. So it basically requires health insurance plans to submit their commission rate. Like, let's just pretend, a lot of people insurance, they don't understand that. But if I say real estate, you'll get it. Let's say you're in real estate and you get a commission. Let's say you've shown all these houses to people. And anyway, you make the sale and then you don't get the commission. That's kind of what's happening to these insurance agents. So anyway, that bill passed, I'm happy to say. And Senate Bill 809, eminent domain. It's a bipartisan bill that I did with Senator Peterson. It's a property rights bill for farmers and businesses. Right now, farms and businesses that suffer a partial take can receive 3 years of just compensation for lost profits if they lose their property in a whole take, eminent domain case. But a whole take victim receives only 1 year of lost profit. So that was wrong. So we had to fix that. I also, Senate Bill 106, had a redistricting bill to pass. So anyway, we're trying to get rid of gerrymandering, and I appreciate all my patrons, Suderline, Sturdivant, Howell, Vogel, me. Anyway, stay tuned next week. It's going to be exciting. Cut to the chase with Senator Chase next Friday from 6 to 7. Stay tuned.